Hi, everyone. Welcome to Authors in Conversation on a Mighty Blaze. I am your host, Jane Roper, and I am so excited to have with us today two fabulous authors. We have Grace Talusan, who is the author of The Body Papers, and she will be in conversation with Gina Apostle, who is the author of The Revolution According to Raimundo Mata, among other things. Welcome to you both. We're so excited to have you here on this wonderful day. Let's see. So Grace Talusan's first book, The Body Papers, which is a wonderful book. Having read it myself, I can attest to that. But so can the New York Times, because it was a New York Times Editor's Choice selection, a must-read for the Massachusetts Book Awards, a Forward Indies finalist, and winner of the Restless Books Prize for New Immigrant Writing. Author Nina McLaughlin captured this incredible book perfectly, saying, Grace's finely wrought and eloquent memoir is visceral bodily, and throbs with pain and trauma, sexual abuse by a family member, cancer, the phantom limb ache of an outsider in a foreign land, and later as an outsider in the homeland. Grace was born in the Philippines and raised in New England. She graduated from Tufts University and the MFA program in writing at UC Irvine. She is the recipient of a U.S. Fulbright Fellowship to the Philippines and an Artist Fellowship Award from the Massachusetts Cultural Council. She taught writing for many years at Tufts University and Grub Street. Currently, Grace is the Fannie Hurst Writer in Residence at Brandeis University. Her story, The Book of Life and Death, was chosen as the 2020 Boston Book Festival's One City, One Story selection. Welcome, Grace.
Yay,
do you have a copy of your book on you, by any chance?
I have it.
Did you hold it up? Okay. Okay. Good. There it is. There it is. Great. Maybe you held it up and I missed it. Gina Apostle is the author of 4 novels, including Insurrecto, which was named by Publishers Weekly as one of the 10 best books of 2018, was an editor's choice of the New York Times, and shortlisted for the Dayton Prize. Her third book, Gun Dealer's Daughter, won the 2013 PEN Open Book Award. Her first 2 novels, Bibliolepsy and The Revolution According to Raimundo Mata, both won the Juan Laya Prize for the novel, which is basically the Philippine National Book Award. Her essays and stories have appeared in the New York Times, Los Angeles Review of Books, Foreign Policy, Gettysburg Review, Massachusetts Review, and others. This month, the first U.S. edition of The Revolution According to Raimundo Mata was published, and we're here to celebrate that today. I think it came out a week ago, just about?
Yeah, just a week ago, yeah.
Wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And John Barth calls it a brilliant tour de force of a novel. And the New York Times says, I love this, Virgil should offer libations to the gods in thanksgiving that Gina Apostol writes about the Philippines' founding stories instead of Rome's. Gina lives in New York City and Western Massachusetts, where she joins us from today, and grew up in the Philippines. She teaches at the Fieldston School in New York City. Welcome, Gina. We're so honored to have you with us today.
Yeah, me too. I'm very honored to be with you.
All right. Take it away, Grace.
Okay. Well, congratulations on the U.S. publication. The book has so far received all these positive reviews, most recently in the New York Times, where Randy Boyagoda, the reviewer, described your writing as in this way. She writes historical fiction like Hilary Mantel on acid. Which is great. You've published novels both in the Philippines and in the US, and an earlier version of The Revolution According to Raimundo Mata was published in 2009 in the Philippines and won the Philippine National Book Award, which is the second time you've won it. Bibliolepsy also won. Can you share how Raimundo Mata came to be published in the US this year?
Yeah, it's a novel I had so much fun writing. And when Insurrecto came out, and there were all of these questions for me about where did Magsalin come from? This character was in Insurrecto. I'm going, well, actually, she was in this other book. So I was explaining that to my agent. I was explaining that to my publisher. And so my publisher bought my first 2 books. So they decided after Insurrecto, they bought the 2 books that had been published in the Philippines, and Bibliolepsy and Raimundo Mata, and they're coming out with Bibliolepsy soon, and that's how Raimundo Mata came in because of the interest in the character Magsalin in Insurrecto.
Got it. So they're related in a way. They're connected.
Yeah, I used to describe Insurrecto as Raimundo Mata without footnotes, because of the multiple narrations, the multiple perspectives that you get in both of the novels, and also the fact that I was doing revolutionary history, but I was trying to figure out how to speak that revolutionary history, given the really lack of a knowledge of that history.
Yeah. Yes. So this is related to the publishing question, because I think some of the people viewing today are maybe writers or maybe aspiring authors, and maybe they never considered publishing outside of the US. Could you talk a little bit about your experience of publishing in the Philippines, and maybe what are some of the differences and similarities, or why someone would choose to publish abroad versus here? Just, I don't know. I just was thinking about that unique experience.
Yeah, that's a really good question, because one, I never think about it, because when I'm writing, I'm just writing the book. And I think that's really important. I think that's really important to say to writers who are aspiring to write, you're really focused on the book. I've always been focused on the book. I've never really thought about what's going to happen to the book. For a long time, I had no agent. And I'd be sending things to agents, but you know how you used to send things to agents? You would put you would email, you would put the thing in an envelope, and then you always had the extra envelope for when it came back. So you're always ready for rejection. You're always ready for the fact that the book that you love is not going to be immediately loved by someone else. And I've never had any qualms about that fact, because I love writing. For me, it's all about the book and the intensity that I have. That intense relationship I have with the novel is so, for me, so beautiful and just such a commanding part of my life. I don't think about the publishing. So whatever opportunities are out there, I just say, hey, are you interested? You want it? Take it. So for a long time, I couldn't get an agent in the States. And I had friends in the Philippines, and they were very interested in the novel. Beautiful publisher, Karina Velasco of Anvil, really, really smart woman. And, you just trust people. For me, it's about trusting the person to understand your book, no matter who that person is, no matter where they are. I really do not believe in thinking about people like status or things like that. What you want is the person who loves your book. That for me is what's important. Even with my agent might get annoyed with me because if that person doesn't really like the book, and there are all of these other kind of questions about it, I don't want that publisher. I don't want that editor. So so that for me is how it came. Someone liked it. I said, okay, you're going to do something with it. These other people don't want it. It's the way I told my daughter about college. The people who don't want you, they don't matter. So.
Right. Yeah, I love that, because it does take away all this external noise about art making or publishing, because it's not even relevant. It's like, the connection that you have.
I mean, even a review is irrelevant. In terms of it's relevant in terms of the publishing. It's relevant in terms of the fact that someone liked your book, but it's not relevant actually in terms of the book. The book has its integrity, and the book has its demand. I think of the book as like an organism, that I'm trying to keep it alive, and that's really what's important. That the book is alive for me.
Definitely.
This is so inspiring. I just have to say, I know there are aspiring writers out there, and one right here. Like, I love this. This is fantastic. This is such a great attitude to have.
Yeah, I mean, it's a healthy attitude. I think it's an attitude for life, really. For just living.
Absolutely. I was reading the new author's note that you wrote to the American edition, and basically I was like highlighting the entire thing, which makes all the highlighting like not do its job of just picking out lines. But I wanted to pick out a couple of things from the author's note, and one is about this process of writing, because I think some people get the impression that in order for writing or art making to be profound, you have to suffer, it has to be painful and difficult. And what you write in the author's note is pleasure and joy. And like, and to me, it was almost like falling in love, because you even write about remembering the night that you met the novel, or that you started. It was a midnight in New Hampshire in the spring. Like I can even remember, that moment because it was so potent. And so could you talk a little bit about this, about that process? Because I think it's counter to what people imagine the artistic process is.
I would say about writing and joy, for me, writing is about joy. And I feel that, okay, when I'm writing a novel and I don't find pleasure in the novel, there's something wrong with the novel. So what I'm doing is I'm looking for the pleasure. And once I find pleasure in that novel, I know that the structure is right. I know that the voice is right. I know that I can keep going. So I kind of claw my way into pleasure in a way. If I've started the novel, what I do now, what I've learned is never start a novel if you don't think you'll finish it. If you feel that there's something, I won't start it, because my problem is once I start a novel, I actually have to finish it. It's really bad. There's this novel I just finished over the pandemic. I just finished this novel that I had begun a while ago before Insurrecto, but because I had begun it, I needed to finish it. So I needed to find the pleasure in that book. And that book took a lot longer to find the pleasure. And I didn't stop. I didn't give it, it was a full draft already. I didn't give it to my agent because it wasn't pleasurable. I didn't have that joy. So joy for me is where the novel, I know that the novel is a novel. And for me, that's what writing is about. Writing is in finding pleasure and having pleasure in it. I think that is what we should be doing with life. We should find what gives us joy. It happens that writing gives me joy. If writing didn't give me joy, I would prefer to do something else. But writing gives me absolute joy. I recognize that's a kind of luck, a kind of weird luck. I just find it really absorbing. But ways in which you find pleasure, for instance, the last novel, Insurrecto, I would say that was immediately pleasurable, which meant that the weird format that it had, which was moving in time with two different storytellers, was the correct structure. Gun Dealer's Daughter, really bad. The pleasure, it was hard to find the pleasure in that novel. And once I figured out, oh, she's ill, and I just need to put all my language play, all of these Latinates, all of these poetry things that I've learned from college, put all of that into the novel, play with the knowledge of English, and basically what was beneath that was just playing with the English language, which was my way of resistance to the violent colonization of using English in the Philippines.
Yeah, and so you bring this up about play and also the language. I think anyone who's read your work, especially Raimundo Mata, can see that pleasure. Like there's riddles, there's games, there's wordplay, there's puns. If you know what espejo means, just all this, the names of people, Mimi C, mimic. There's just all these like little bursts of pleasure from finding that and finding. There's a way it feels so inclusive. Like I'm part of the joke, or I'm part of the party or the game, to recognize it. Yeah. And so I mentioned the author's note. I didn't didn't count them, but there's like a few notes. There's a translator's note. There's the editor's notes. There's the footnotes, where people are fighting with each other. It's almost like reading comments, but because the novel is, 100 years ago, they found the text from 100 or so years ago. I imagine the editor and the academic like mailing each other these manuscripts with like little, catty notes to each other and telling each other to be quiet. And it's just, it's so fun. I don't even know how to describe it. It's like such pleasure as a reader to read that. And I also feel it has a very Filipino, it feels like a Filipino reading experience. I don't even know what that means, but like the fact that it's mostly in English, and yet there's references to languages used in the Philippines, such as Tagalog, Waray, Cebuano, Chabacano, Bangla, Taok, which I hadn't heard of, plus colonizers' languages like Spanish and English. People are fighting over like the correct story and the facts. There was just so many ways that I just felt like, oh, this is what it feels like to be Filipino for me. Like all these different pieces and
thank you.
Welcome. And then there's this other line about the Philippines, and the notion of the Philippines, in a sense, was produced by a novel, and Jose Rizal. And so I know some people may not know who he is, but if you grew up in the Philippines, it sounds like, well, in the book it says the Rizal Law of 1956, Filipinos must read Rizal and know who the national hero is. And if I've spent a little bit of time in the Philippines, and we eventually go see Rizal. We go to honor him in some way, and so both this book and Insurrecto, there's he's there as a presence, and I just wonder what kind of relationship you had to him, I guess, when you first started learning about him, and how he come to be such a part of your work.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I'm glad with this work to bringing Rizal into conversation. I think Rizal is absolutely an important world figure. I think he is important to the history of Asia. I think he's important to the history of colonization in the world. And I do think he's important also to American understanding of the Philippines. I mean, the Rizal Law actually was interesting in that Rizal was a figure that the Americans really liked for the Filipinos because he was killed by Spain, not by America. So that's really, so that as a colonizer hero, they liked him. But Rizal happens to be, he's a national hero of the Philippines. Every single person, every single town in the Philippines has a plaza. And in the plaza, you will find a statue of Rizal. And Rizal is usually wearing the hat, the overcoat, the European outfit, and he's usually carrying a book. As a child, I hated Rizal, I have to say. Rizal is very funny. I'll show you something here. This is what you have to read when you're in 4th grade. Let me see if I can find it. Jose Rizal, his travels. Here's grade 5. Jose Rizal, his exile. So you just have all of these stories. Here's grade 3. Jose Rizal, where is that? His studies. So you read from grade 1 to grade 6, you read about Rizal until he dies. And so he's like George Washington in the Cherry Tree. He's like that guy who does these good things. Like he loses a slipper on the boat. And then because he wants to make another child happy, he throws away his other slipper so that child will have 2 slippers. Like, fuck you, Rizal. So as a child, I found him really obnoxious, his life. But then I actually read him. And Rizal really is a literary genius. He really is a founding thinker in colonial thought. He precedes Edward Said. The concepts of Orientalism, they're already in Rizal. And his anti-colonial novels, which were read politically, are really art pieces. And so I wanted to see Rizal once I figured out, oh my God, the Filipinos, the Philippine nation is really constructed by concepts of characters in Rizal. Everyone's an Ibarra, everyone's a Maria Klein, all of these things, which are all annoying, to be honest. But they become cliches, but there's a kind of injustice done to the artist when you are read only through your so-called revolutionary political um, uh, ideas, and you're not read as an artist. So one of the things that's really blasphemous about Raimundo Mata is the concept that is a question. Let's say this question: did Rizal revise? That is so weird for a Filipino. But of course he revised, So, catching Rizal in the act of writing, in the act of being a writer, is a bit blasphemous for a Filipino because he's a statue. So I wanted to create that Rizal, to kind of even just put the concept of Rizal the writer, the concept of Rizal having, actually he wasn't able. He had writer's block in Dapitan when he was exiled there. He couldn't write. And when he was imprisoned by the Spaniards in this island in Mindanao. And I just wanted to see him as an artist and bring back that provisional Filipino, the provisional quality of revolution, the contingent aspect of history that comes through in the act of reading and the act of writing.
Yeah, there's almost like maybe like a way that he's compared to Christ, or there's just like this way that we see both of them. And
he
maybe
died at age 35, and they go, "Oh, he's only 2 years after Jesus."
Yes. Yeah. I wonder why. I mean, I don't know that like academic world so well, but I wonder why he isn't included in studies about revolution.
So why are Filipinos not seen or known by almost anyone?
Yeah.
I mean, who knows your history, Grace, right off the bat? Who knows the conditions of your existence as a Filipino in any really profound way? Just in a random collection of people, if you're not in the Philippines. Whereas for the Filipino, and I will say this about my way, I grew up in the Philippines. Whereas for the Filipino, their self-regard is enormous. Their concept of themselves is like absolute, And in my hometown, for instance, it's not even being a Filipino. It's being a person from this particular town.
Waray, right?
And being a Waray. That's so important, So I think that dichotomy is really important, for a Filipino writer in the United States. The powerful self-regard of the Filipino, which actually comes from Rizal. I'm going to say, that the sense of a nation, the sense of something stable comes from a concept really of having read Rizal forever. We're a Filipino. We're look at Rizal. This is and how he defines the Filipino. So that sense of stability and regard that Filipinos have, which comes from, I think, a history of being framed through novels, through this particular writer, and through the writing that came after, is very important, because to say that the Filipino is unseen, unrecognized, is not to say that the Filipino does not have regard and a sense of self. That sense of self is fragmented by the gaze of others. But I will say, I will really resist this concept of an instability in the Filipino, in him or herself. Given that, of course, we have a very violent president right now, and it's really annoying and all of that. But we have a revolutionary history that tells us how ethical we are, how powerful our sense of justice was, how beautiful our concept of freedom was, that we fought in slippers with knives, a group of people who had all of the weapons. And so our powerful regard is there in our history. And a lot of the things that I'm doing with my novels is just to kind of set up, multiply that concept of the Filipino. It's not just that the colonized is fragmented or unseen by the other, but that this very powerful sense of self exists.
Yeah, it seems similar in a way to thinking about being an artist or writing. Like there's the stability that we can have inside of ourselves, and then there's all the other stuff and the fragmenting and the things that people
the
have to
whole
say.
thing about the publishing industry,
Yeah.
the ways in which you end up not having, end up being destabilized by, oh, there's another list out there, or oh,
Right.
there's another, that person didn't review me, or that, people. There's so many different ways that people read, and we can't be read by everyone in the same way. We have to be clear about why we wish to be read and how we wish to be read, and do the work that we need to do. And the fragmenting that comes out of the fact that we are in a capitalist world, in a very white publishing space, that is, you just saw a New Yorker, the New Yorker staff, the union that this so-called, progressive magazine can't really wants to give their workers $45,000 in New York City as starting salary. That is goddamn bullshit.
Yeah.
That is bullshit. So you have a publishing world that's part of capitalism, that's part of white world, capitalism being, more or less set up through white supremacist norms. And but we're doing art. And art is it's part of capitalist world. But what is fabulous about art, that it is working within this system, but it is always, always, always eyeing that system and saying, fuck you, system, and we should kind of have that regard for our own decision to be writers, and recognize, the boldness of doing that, in a dumb capitalist system.
Right.
It's interesting when I'm listening to you saying that, Gina. I mean, the fact that I imagine in some ways, your book, the Raimundo Mata book, already had been published to great acclaim in the Philippines, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was once you had commercial success here, that then the American publishers were interested. Oh, okay, well now we can make some money. So let's bring this book, finally bring this book to a larger audience, which probably deserved a larger audience from the beginning. But
yeah, but at the same time, you have to give credit to the press that did decide to do it, because it remains a text that for many people will consider opaque, even though it isn't, because you know what it is? It's just the way we tweet. As you were saying, Grace, it's just like tweeting. Everyone is just tweeting in my novel and doing like bullshit, you're stupid, I'm the one who's smart, all of that stuff that happens. It's just tweet world, even though I did publish it in 2009. But there are ways that people see texts, and it's like the realist text is more accessible, and but I think there's something very accessible about this text. But so to give credit to my publisher, they did this text, and they're still doing a good job with it. So yes, so really, capitalism, use capitalism when it's useful for you. Do it.
Right.
And always commend those in the capitalist world that are doing work for artists.
Absolutely, we need them.
You had mentioned, what's going on in the Philippines. I don't know if you saw 1,000 Cuts, Ramona Diaz.
Yeah, several times.
Okay, I'm probably going to end up watching it several times too, but it's so incredible. And in some ways, your book, Raimundo Mata is like, it's related. Like there's ways like thinking about like fake news and thinking about who controls the history and the stories and what's getting out, and it's really incredible to think about it, that, but maybe it's something that we've been, all of us have to think about how we read and think and who we believe and so forth, because it has huge repercussions. But I guess I was just wondering how, your work tends to have historical subjects, but it seems very much related to now. And I wonder how you think about that.
Because I do think that we are always connected to history. History is not for me I think history is very material, and we are very much. I mean, look at the insurrection that happened 2 weeks ago at the Capitol, and look at the history of white mobs in America from Tulsa 1921, Wilmington 1898, 1919 under Woodrow Wilson. There are tons and tons of these white mob moments in America, and so for us to recognize when these things happen, that and to have a recognition, oh, this crime happened before, and so to if we're aware of it as a crime, instead of like, oh, they're just white people being white, having sad feelings about the president, whatever it is, when in fact it is a part of the criminality of the American white supremacist world. If we had that more accurate recognition of this history, accurate understanding, and being able to find the parallels to Tulsa 1921, and Washington D.C. 2021. Hello, the burning of Greenwood in Tulsa. Remember, that was also an election riot. It was a mayor who won from this populist group that where two groups combined. I forget what they were called. It was a populist group of black politicians, black people, and poor whites. They came together. They won, and that was the burning of Tulsa. It was actually an election thing. So when we see when we are able to grapple accurately with the moment, because we understand the parallel in history, we can take a more ethical stance toward it. And that's why I bring in the revolutionary history of the Philippines, because I think the revolutionary history of the Philippines was ethical. It was an ethical response to oppression. So that fighting, that resistance that they did was an ethical response. And if our government under the current Congress had just said it's wrong, and this is another white mob, understood accurately what that was, we wouldn't be having these 140 GOP people saying, we're going to go with Trump. They would have understood. But we don't have a good reading of history in America because we have a whitewashed history. And there is also a whitewashed history in the Philippines because of colonization. It's so powerful. It is so powerful, the colonized history of the Philippines. So that too is what I'm bringing out. That's the parallel. The parallel regarding fake news, regarding that theme too, the instability of the text. What I try to do in the novel is have people understand that they're reading, that the text is something that's being constructed and made up. And the more you recognize that the text that you're reading, the post that you're reading on Facebook or whatever, is constructed, you might be able to interrogate more who's constructing it, where's the truth in it, where are the sources that I could go and figure out whether it's true. The more you understand that the text that we are living in, that all the texts that we read, even ourselves, I would say, are mediated, I think the more powerful and ethical we can be, and maybe more justice could be done, where we won't be falling into the power grabs of stupid people like Trump.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah. It's a hopeful note to end on. That's
I think, and this is what you have a lot of writers here. This is where acts of reading and acts of writing are really important. Like where you're trying to, when you recognize that the role of the reader. I love the mediated text because precisely, I think it's a political aspect for me. It's a political matter for me, the mediated text, because it's having us recognize in our body that, oh, I'm being moved. I'm being moved. It's so important that who's moving me, who's making me feel this way. And the work of art allows that more kind of careful mediation.
Yeah, it's like with a decision. Yeah, like the decision that Twitter or Facebook had to put those signs that said this is not factual, or even just that kind of act of saying this has been disputed or something, like that's very important actually. And I think it was finally an interruption.
Yeah. And as you see in my novel, there's this concept, no, that's not true. Yes, that's true. Hey, this is the one that's true. And so that kind of recognizing of that construction of the text, that is us. I mean, it's the human being is a construction of a text, recognizing that we're always, I mean, we are only ourselves because we're read by others.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wonderful.
So there's an existential aspect to that, to the mediated text that's always in my novels. I think it is existential.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, Gina and Grace, both of you. This is fantastic, and I'm very eager to pick up your book. Well, many of your books, Gina. So I want to make sure everyone who's watching knows where they can get them. Of course, bookshop.org is a great option. Also, want to give a shout out to Amherst Books in Amherst, Mass.
That's my bookstore here.
Yeah, it's your local indie.
My local in New York is 3 Lives, but here is Amherst.
Excellent, great. And Grace we want to make sure we mention Paper Cuts in Jamaica Plain for all you Boston folk. Also, there's Bel Canto Books in Long Beach, which is owned by a Filipino woman, right? Yeah, so those are great options as well, and Bookshop is another option. Again, thank you both so much. Thanks to all of you who were watching. We had a really great, enthusiastic crowd out there. And best of luck to you both. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so long, folks.
Bye.
Bye.